For those of you that don't know, I'm Ben Van Camp. I'm the president of the Chamber Collaborative here in Portsmouth, and we are very excited to continue our educational series this spring or winter. I guess so. I think it leads into spring. I'm just forward thinking, I guess. But with starting with the Department of Insurance today, which is something new for us. I don't think we've ever talked to the Department of Insurance before. So we're excited about that. And I know at least one of our presenters, there's two there, so I'm not sure. But I know Keith is the Deputy Commissioner for the state of New Hampshire Insurance Department. He's got 28 years and expertise in the financial services industry, and has been in the New Hampshire Insurance Department since 2007. Graduate of Holy Cross in Russian. All right, you don't hear that every day. There you go. But Holy Cross, that's Worcester is my hometown, so I'm always happy to see another Worcester person in the mix. But I'll leave it there and let Keith and the team at the Department of Insurance take it from here, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers as we move forward.
Great, thanks, Ben. So what I'll do is I'll kind of jump in here. I'll try to maintain eye contact with the camera. I have to look at some notes. I was thinking I was at a podium. But there's only a few of us here, so let's make this as interactive as possible. As I go through things, please feel free to raise your hand, wave me down, and we can answer questions. But I'll start off by saying that, yes, I'm Keith Nyan, Deputy Commissioner. I've actually been here at the department for about 17 years, and I'm here with my colleague, Christian Citarella, who is our department's most tenured actuary and by title, the Chief Property and Casualty Actuary for the state. And Christian also has the title of, I get this correct, the chair of the NAICs, which is our national association, the Casualty Actuarial and Statistical Task Force Actuary, which actually puts certainly Christian, but the state of New Hampshire in a very unique position to influence and help guide a lot of those actuarial type policies that are happening, in particular around property and casualty insurance throughout the country. So you'll hear from Christian a little bit later on as it relates to workers' compensation, which I am eager to admit that I don't know a whole heck of a lot about, which is why we have Christian here with me. In short, mission of the department is to protect the New Hampshire insurance public by the promotion of laws and rules, and to really look out for the benefit of consumers. The actual mission statement does read, the mission of the New Hampshire Insurance Department is to promote and protect the public good by ensuring the existence of a safe and competitive insurance marketplace through the development and enforcement of the insurance laws of the state of New Hampshire, and we're committed to doing so in an honest, effective, and timely manner. So kind of keeping that in mind as the objective of the department as a whole, I can tell you we're comprised of roughly 80 employees, and that does certainly fluctuate with vacancies. We here in state government, just like in private industry, are dealing with staff shortages, and it's not always easy to find qualified and competent individuals to fill those roles. So our ranks right now are a little bit below that 80 mark, but if anybody has an insurance background out there, give us a call. We might be able to find a position for you. As we start to look to promote, the consumer good and protect consumers, we really kind of look at the department as broken down into, I'm going to call it four pieces. The first and most important piece is our financial exams division, and that division consists of financial analysts as well as what you'd kind of think of as auditors who are charged with actually looking at practices of the company, financial practices. And analysts are doing financial breakdowns to make sure that companies remain solvent so that when consumers do have claims, companies have adequate reserves and resources to pay those claims. Probably the most important consumer protection that we offer as an agency. Once we move off of that, we get into what I think of as the more individual consumer-centric pieces. And I've often explained it as it's like a three-legged stool, where you have the Consumer Services Division, which is kind of the face and eyes and ears of the insurance department. That division interacts with individual insurance consumers on a daily basis, listening to their complaints and their concerns. And we'll come back to that here momentarily. Second leg of that stool is the Market Conduct Team. The Market Conduct Team reacts to anything from individual complaints, trend and patterns and practices of issues, things that we read about in the newspaper or brought to our attention, could be by whistleblowers, really any sort of catalyst or information that would lead us to do not a financial audit of the insurance companies that we regulate, but an operational audit, making sure that those companies are paying claims properly, selling policies in a competitive, fair sort of way without violating unfair trade practices and how they approach consumers. So it's really an operational audit to make sure that companies and individuals are following the laws and rules. And then lastly is what we refer to as our compliance staff. And the compliance staff is the front end, where any policy that's actually sold in the state of New Hampshire is reviewed by one of our experts to make sure that the wording in those contracts, in those insurance policies, meets all state insurance mandates, guidelines, et cetera, so that an individual who's buying a fully insured product in the state of New Hampshire knows that the laws passed by the legislature have been incorporated into that contract. Back to consumer services, though, I've been asked to kind of give a quick overview. The unit consists of, and this is what when we talk about consumers, I'd say for your businesses, we consider businesses consumers as well. Just like individuals who may have a question about an insurance product, so too can a business owner or a business. So the unit in and of itself has its own mission, which is to educate, navigate, and investigate. And in that regards, there's a staff of 6 people. There's a director and 2 experts in property and casualty insurance. And those lines are what we typically think of as auto insurance, homeowners insurance as individuals. And then we have life and health experts who, as the name suggests, experts in life insurance, annuities, health insurance, those types of other types of products which are ancillary to those. So they're experts who have spent their entire careers either working directly in the industry or here as regulators or both. So that unit is charged with taking inbound phone calls from the public or written correspondence. Typical phone calls would include someone who is calling to say, hey, listen, I don't understand what health insurance is. And that's where we would provide, unbiased information to help educate the public about really anything to do with any type of insurance product. Frequently, we'll receive questions, whether it be through email or through phone calls. And it might be, hey, I've been in an automobile accident and I don't quite understand what I need to do next. It seems as though the company is lowballing me. I thought my car was worth more. So there, it's an opportunity for us to assist a consumer navigating the complexities of the insurance industry by saying, well, this is what you can expect next. Make sure you're reaching out to your agent, talk to your insurance company. But it's an opportunity to really provide guidance to an individual so that he or she can continue to kind of control that claim or whatever that insurance issue on his or her own. And again, it's unbiased information. We're not paid by any insurance company. We're not influenced by insurance agents. We're really the insurance police in that regard. We're here to be a resource to those individuals. And then lastly, the investigative function, which is really our bread and butter. When an individual gets to a point where he or she believes that there's been a violation of one of our insurance laws or rules, which most consumers don't know what those are. So really kind of think in the context, a consumer thinks something is just fundamentally going wrong. I mentioned an example earlier a few minutes ago, that someone's been in an automobile accident. It is a very frequent occurrence that when someone's had an automobile collision and it's been totaled, there's no value left, the insurance agent is going to offer a settlement amount to the consumer, which frequently is below what the individual thinks their automobile is worth. There's a process, laws and rules which kind of dictate what the company must do. But ultimately, if there's a discrepancy, for example, of what the consumer believes, what the company believes, you can always come here to the insurance department. We'll investigate. We will actually write to our licensee, ask for their side of the story as to why the company believes it is adequately adjudicating that claim, offering proper settlement, and we can almost in some ways arbitrate or be the eyes and ears for the consumer to make sure they're being treated fairly. other types of issues that we routinely deal with, and kind of get away from the property and casualty side. Health insurance is a real big issue here in the state, where frankly, frequently individuals, customers who have health insurance go for a treatment, and perhaps a particular or desired treatment is being denied by the insurance company. If it's a prior authorization request and it's being denied, we can assist the individual in making sure that all the facts are being heard, to make sure that hopefully we can ultimately intercede, in many ways steer a company to the conclusion that the consumer is hoping for, all within the context of what the laws and rules include. Another example might be on the life insurance side, where, as you can imagine, it's pretty clean on a life insurance claim. Someone's either going to be deceased or not. As long as you have a death certificate, typically, claims are going to be paid. But believe it or not, there's a lot of complaints that we receive about the manner in which a life insurance policy or an annuity contract are sold. And those investigations are typically, looking back at a sale that took place many, many years ago. It's almost a forensic investigation, looking at documents that have been signed, dates, et cetera, to make sure that the product that was purchased was the product that an individual actually thought he or she was buying. That's kind of the more formal investigative process. So again, the consumer division's here to help out individual consumers, whether it be a business owner or one of your business's employees. Notably last year, calendar year 23, the insurance department actually, I got a number here, actually processed almost 1,300 formal investigations, and we recovered for individuals more than $6 million. So this is a significant amount of money when you think, not everybody's going to get a $20,000 recovery, but we did have a consumer who received over $1 million that he or she otherwise wouldn't have received. And then there are those individuals who received literally $2 back because they were overcharged on paying for a bill. A charge for sending a paper copy versus an electronic copy. So many things that we do here, and we certainly encourage any of your members to reach out to us. Formal complaints, information requests about what's going on, or help in navigating the insurance industry. On that, I'm actually going to transition over to Christian. He's going to give you an overview of what workers' compensation is and what we do here at the department. And then following that, we'll transition back and talk a little bit more about the health insurance markets.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Understanding that this, that the group that we're speaking with is business owners, we thought workers' comp would be an excellent topic to go through. If there are any questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask. But workers' compensation is, of course, required by New Hampshire state law. Employers are required to have workers' compensation insurance in most situations. Workers' compensation, of course, provides wage replacement, medical and other benefits to workers when an injury that is causally related to employment occurs. Just as a kind of a brief overview, workers' compensation is necessary, is required for corporations in the state, and it's both corporations and limited liability corporations. They may exclude up to 3 members or executive officers from that mandatory workers' compensation insurance coverage. And so, that's kind of like the one situation where they don't need to have that coverage. However, I will say many hiring companies, many general contractors, if they want to hire a subcontractor, will ask to have a policy in place, and so that's a situation where you need to work it out with the contractor. And then we can talk about, there's a situation where there's a ghost policy. We can talk about that in a little bit. So Because it's required by the state law, employers who are unable to secure coverage in what's called the voluntary market can secure coverage through the assigned risk pool. Once a policy is secured, proof of coverage, it needs to be reported to the Department of Labor, and that can be facilitated through the NCCI, which is the National Council for Compensation Insurers. And I can talk a little more about that in a minute. Just a kind of idea of where we are. Right now, the workers' compensation insurance market is humming along very nicely. When I heard that Keith was going to be talking about this before your group, I actually asked to be involved because this is an area of insurance that I don't mind talking about because it's really a lot of good news right now. Premiums are very, very stable. Coverages are excellent. The service is very, very good. We haven't had any problems, any significant problems that we've seen as far as producers or carriers. And as I said, the rates are just continue to go down. Right now, there are about 250 licensed workers' compensation insurance carriers in the state of New Hampshire. Probably about 150 of them are writing business in the last year. The assigned risk market, again, this is the backstop for this mandatory coverage, it makes up a very small piece of the overall market. I think we're right around 6% of the market, which is very, very nice that it's that low. Employers are able to find coverage, generally speaking, within the voluntary market, which generally offers lower premiums, the flexibility of experience rating. So if you have fewer claims over a period of time, you're going to get a lower premium. It also allows for risk mitigation opportunities. And so if you have if you run a safety protocol, or if you can demonstrate that all of your employees are wearing protective gear and things like this, then you're going to get discounts, on your insurance premium, which you can get in the voluntary market, which isn't available in the assigned risk pool. Nevertheless, it's important for employers to know that minimum premiums are necessary because there is going to always be a cost associated with the policy, even if there aren't any claims, due to the expense of just issuing that policy, running that audit afterwards, and another general oversight by the insurance company. As I mentioned a minute ago, premiums have been coming down. They've been coming down. Rates have been coming down for the last 10 years. And this is due to many factors, not least of which is, a combination of fewer injuries and quicker return to work. So there's been a very positive experience when it comes to getting workers seen by doctors, getting the treatment that's necessary, and getting them returned to work. It's when workers are out of work for long periods of time that indemnity benefits then kick in, and that gets to be quite expensive. If injuries or linger and medical care is delayed, then it's going to take longer for them to heal, and it's going to be more expensive on the medical side as well. And so we've seen that workers are being treated, they're being seen by doctors, and they're getting back to work quickly. And that translates into lower rates. I mentioned the NCCI. NCCI is our advisory organization for the state of New Hampshire. They act as what used to be called the Bureau back in the day, and they are the organization that produces what are called loss costs that then translate into rates and drive premium. And every year, this organization runs an analysis of all the claims that have happened in New Hampshire relative to the region and nationwide, and then produce a filing that affects rates for the state. Those rate filings have been coming down the last 10, 12 years now, and so that's very, very good news. There are important things that employers need to know when it comes to reporting an injury. Employers have an obligation to notify the New Hampshire Department of Labor when an employee reports a work-related injury by filing something called a first report of injury form. Employers should also provide the first report of injury to the workers' compensation insurance carrier to make sure that the carrier is aware of that. And that way that they then can take the next steps in adjudicating that claim. There is an option to not have to file such a form if there is no lost time at work. There is a one-time treatment for medical treatment of less than $2,000, and the employer does not dispute the dollar amount of the treatment and pays that medical bill within 30 days. Those sorts of details, and as far as that first injury report process, there are folks at the Department of Labor that can answer questions on that. Other benefits for the workers' compensation, I said they pay indemnity benefits at 60% of the average weekly wage for that employer within some limits. There's a minimum, there's a maximum. And they also pay for all medical expenses, and they pay for any loss for permanent impairment, and then they'll also pay for vocational rehabilitation services to get that person back into the workforce. There is a thing that is called the Second Injury Fund that we have in the state of New Hampshire. The Second Injury Fund was created as an incentive to encourage employers to hire or retain employees with permanent physical or mental impairments of any origin by reducing the employer's liability for workers' compensation claims. The Second Injury Fund limits workers' compensation liability should an employee sustain a compensable work-related injury by reimbursing insurance carriers for certain expenses paid on the qualifying claim. The classic, it's not fun to talk about, but classic examples of, there's a whole schedule as to permanent injuries that's written into New Hampshire state law. As far as different injuries by body part. And so if you lose an eye while employed, an eye, is the benefit for having lost an eye is a certain number of thousands of dollars. If you lose two eyes, it's a lot more expensive, right? However, the Second Injury Fund would kick in if you already have missing one eye and you lose the second eye. It's not fun to talk about. I apologize, but that's where that comes in. And of course, the purposes of that is that employers do not, it frees up employers from that concern of, oh no, if I hire this person with this physical impairment, will my workers' comp premium be more expensive because of it? Because any otherwise less serious injury to that person would be more expensive, and that's what that covers there. So when it comes to recommendations we have from the department when it comes to kind of keeping and maintaining this market, the workers' comp market, and keeping it healthy, we do encourage all employers to use an agent when shopping for insurance. Just like any other type of insurance, workers' compensation, you can shop it around. You can talk to different brokers, different producers to get a better premium or a better experience with your workers' compensation provider. As I said, minimum premiums are necessary to maintain a healthy market, and we encourage you, and it's also the law, that you must cooperate with the carrier when it comes time to audit. The workers' compensation premium is based on payroll, and it needs to be kind of rectified at the end of the policy term. So there needs to be an audit of the books, and you need to, recalculate and true up that the premium that is owed at the end of that policy period. There was one more thing that I thought I'd mention, and that was this idea of what's called a ghost policy. So, if you're a sole proprietor and as a sole proprietor, you don't need to purchase insurance because you have no employees. However, if you want to take a job working for a general contractor, they may ask you to have a policy in place just in case you hire someone during the process of your work, right, for that other entity. Insurance producers and insurance carriers can offer what's called a ghost policy, and it basically is you buy an insurance policy and you have that policy just in case you hire someone along the way and during the term of that policy. At the end of the policy, if you didn't hire anyone, all you end up paying is that minimum premium, which is usually somewhere between $600 and $1,000. But it does protect you in case you do hire someone over the course of that that contract. And like I said, it might be necessary in order to engage in some in work. I think that's it. Unless there are questions, that's the kind of the overview that we have for workers' comp.
So Jennifer, I don't know if you had your hand up.
I will make a comment with regards to workers' comp, and maybe you can iterate this, is when you're dealing with contractors, this is where we see this the most frequently, that if a general contractor hires a subcontractor, they need to be sure that there's insurance in place. Otherwise, when they get audited by their own workers' comp, if they do not have proof of insurance for that subcontractor, then that subcontractor's pay or wages get reported on their workers' comp. Is this where you're considering, or you're saying the ghost policy would play?
It might, in certain situations, that might be the most appropriate. It's entirely up, it's up to that general contractor if they want to require insurance, that they have a separate policy, if that subcontractor has that separate policy. Like, whether or not that subcontractor is an employee of the contractor or an independent entity, there is a list of criteria that is in the labor law, and it has to do with, who controls, the day-to-day the day-to-day tasks, who decides, the job in a given moment, who provides the tools or the instruction or the expertise, those sorts of things. And there's a whole list to determine whether or not, that independent contractor is truly independent or whether that's an employee. A way to get around that complication is to have that subcontractor, like you said, have their own policy. If they can prove that they have their own policy, then that many times that will alleviate any concerns or disputes between the general contractor and the general contractor's insurance carrier at audit time.
One of the other questions I had was, for whatever reason, I always thought that workers' comp was mandated by IRS, but you're saying it's actually mandated by the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, it's all state-based. Every state in the nation requires, well, I guess I shouldn't say that anymore. Most states do require workers' compensation, and every system is different. We have a system in New Hampshire, like I said, that is we regulate the industry, but we also rely on NCCI to, for example, run the residual market pool, and kind of funnel employers that can't find a policy. They handle that situation and get them into the residual market and find a servicing carrier that can handle that. Other states do handle it differently, but in the state of New Hampshire, it is required by New Hampshire law and administered that way. Yeah, it's a great point.
So I guess I'll pick it up from there, and I want to kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. Another question, please, Ben.
You're muted.
And you're on mute, Ben. We can't hear you.
It's been a busy week, sorry. I was just going to ask, what are some of the most common mistakes you see businesses around the state make? Where do they get themselves in trouble, and what should they be looking for to not get into that place?
Specific to workers' comp or just in general?
In general, so maybe there's a workman's comp answer, maybe you have a separate answer, but just, overview.
Sure. So I guess that's probably a pretty good segue for where I was going to go anyway, which is, first and foremost, I'll kind of hammer home something that Christian said, which is workers' compensation insurance is compensatory. It's mandatory in the state of New Hampshire. So as a business owner, make sure you're meeting that requirement. Other types of things that are that businesses should do is shop their insurance. As we've talked about, rates can fluctuate. Shopping rates can result in lower premiums. But businesses need to make sure that they do have proper types of coverage for the business. And I do believe you can currently see on the computer screen what types of insurance coverage should businesses be looking into. And I'll try not to read the list going right down here in order, but we'll certainly touch upon them. General liability insurance. Commercial general liability is available to large businesses, and it covers, commercial property. Large companies should consider this type of coverage for claims for bodily injury and property damage as compared to commercial property, which is coverage for your company's physical assets, from instances of fire, theft, burst pipes, etc. And then probably the more common types of coverage that we see here in New Hampshire is a business owner's policy, which similar to, commercial general liability and commercial property, but for small businesses. And it covers for a business that operates outside of an individual's home who needs coverage for bodily injury and property damage. And equally important that we see in today's day and age, individual endorsements can be purchased for these types of policies for cyber liability, and certainly think about, businesses that have had privacy breaches and, information's been made available to the public. It's a very specific type of insurance to protect a company from cybercrime. And then business interruption insurance. We receive a fairly large number of complaints around business interruption insurance. So a business obviously has been impacted by an incident, and it basically provides for lost income. But you don't have the coverage, you don't have the ability to collect that type of lost income unless you specifically purchased the policy. Christian covered workers' comp, commercial auto, similar to our own private automobile insurance. It covers drivers that work for the business, or in the case of personal, family members, but it also covers the fleet of vehicles that a business might have. Professional liability insurance and commercial umbrella, obviously providing to larger businesses, and it's just general protection for things that can go wrong within the business. In particular, around professional liability, I will tell you that we're seeing an increasing, a hardening market here in the state of New Hampshire. That a business could be a church, and churches have been the subject of many crimes over the past few years, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult for those types of businesses to obtain affordable coverage. It's what we call a hardening market. Coverage is still generally available, but premiums are going up very, very quickly. So this list that we're showing to you here on the screen is available. Well, actually, we're going to send it out to everybody here watching this particular webinar. I'm also going to hold up for your review. We have a booklet here available through the insurance department, which is Insuring Your Business, a Small Business Guide to Insurance. So I would say back to your question, Ben, one of the things that we see most often is companies or small businesses that haven't purchased the proper type of insurance to protect their business. So in that regard, we here at the department cannot recommend a particular agent or where to go to buy that insurance, but we do work very closely with an organization that is frequently called the Independent Insurance Agents of New Hampshire. Their street name is the Big I. Their phone number here is 603-224-3965. And you can also reach out to the Big I at info@nhaia.com. What that organization can do can connect any of your members, any individual, certainly a property or a business manager, with an individual in your local area who can help review the business's insurance portfolio, identify gaps in coverage, and assist in procuring coverage for that business. And certainly we always say that the best way to identify a trustworthy agent, if you do not want to contact the big guy, is word of mouth. One business, pick up the phone, contact another business of a similar type and ask, hey, who's your provider? Who's your representative? It's a great way to kind of get through some of those initial meet and greets and transition off. I think we're running out of time. We do have one more topic we did want to touch base upon, which is the health insurance market. In particular, there are some new arrangements that allow businesses to offer insurance type coverage to their employees. One of those in particular, and I'm going to look at my notes here for the name of the acronym, which is in ICHRA. And ICHRA actually stands for Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement. And what this does is, businesses that are offering traditional health insurance plans to their employees are probably pretty familiar with what they need to do. A lot of businesses will work with an agent to help procure a business policy for their employees. However, many businesses, especially small businesses in the state of New Hampshire, may not have the assets available to pay for a fully insured health insurance plan for its employees. So in ICHRA, again, an individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement allows an employer to place a specified amount of money into an account for its employees, all tax-free, so that the employee can use that money for the purchase of an individual health plan. It can go towards premiums, it can go towards co-pays, it can go towards other cost shares, but it's a way for an employer to provide tax-free compensation to itself, but tax-free compensation to its employees for an employee to go out and make some of those purchases on their own. So that's an ICHRA. We're happy to get into more of that, and we can even set up another arrangement here for you, another webinar to talk about some of those details. One of the key pieces of an ICHRA is that an individual needs to purchase an individual health plan, which is most frequently in New Hampshire purchased on what we call the marketplace or the exchange at healthcare.gov. On that, I'm going to stop there and offer up our time for any questions that you might have.
I'll mention small group.
And then I was prompted here to also mention the small group health plan market. Employers who do wish to offer small group coverage can also go to healthcare.gov to make arrangements for selecting those plans for its employees. So, questions? Jennifer, it looks like by nature of your title there, you work in the insurance industry. So what do you got for us? And this isn't Stump the Deputy Commissioner or the Chief Actuary, but yeah.
Not at all. I do work in the insurance industry. I've had my agency for 14 years, started out as a MetLife agent, and then we got purchased by Farmers. So I actually, I'll say that I've had a complaint against me in the past about a flood situation, a misunderstanding of flood. And at first, it was very overwhelming to receive that email that someone's filed a complaint against you. And I'm being really vulnerable right now going out and saying this. But I was like, oh my gosh, what happened here? But I want to say that the situation was handled so well. The representative that, had reached out to me, heard what was going on, took all the information, and it was really more of just, like you had said, a mediation, so to speak, to help the consumer understand that what I was saying, although she didn't like it, was accurate and attested to it. And it was really, it ended up being a nice situation in an awful situation, if that makes any sense.
Well, thank you for that feedback, because I do like to think that we are one of the most approachable insurance departments in the country. Most of us who work here have spent time in the industry. We understand what you're going through. I've actually reached out to a number, and this is for all of your members, but certainly those members who work in the insurance industry, many times agents find themselves in a tough situation. As an appointed agent for an insurance company, there's some pressure sometimes from companies to, if not represent products, certainly represent claims or carry a company's position that may seem detrimental to your customer. That's what we're here for. We don't just help consumers, but if you're an agent and you're having difficulty working with a carrier, reach out to us. Let us advocate for your consumer so that you're not put in a difficult situation between, an appointing authority, in this case a carrier, and your customer. We're here to help on many different fronts.
You're right, and I've used that in the past. Like if I've had a question with an underwriter doing something that I didn't think followed through with the department's way of the land, I've been able to reach out and point that out. Like, you're doing this wrong, and you guys have been there to back us up. But in the case of the flood insurance situation, it was a complete misunderstanding about a shed that wasn't covered and stuff like that. And it was, as much as I tried to navigate it, it was falling on deaf ears. And of course it came to you guys, and it was just really nice to have somebody on the other end, not looking at me like I was bad or I did anything wrong and being accusatory. It was really welcome and refreshing to be like, okay, here is what happened on my side. Here is my position versus the customer's position, and to have it be rectified and it'd be nice and smooth. So I appreciated that, and I wanted to commend them on that. There's two things that I wanted to actually touch upon. Obviously, one of them you're going to laugh at, but I'll say that for the end. But the bigger part is the hardening market. You mentioned that there's a state plan for workers' comp. I don't believe there's a state plan for homeowners insurance yet, but are we looking at that? Because it's getting tough out here. It's getting really challenging. Insurance carriers are tightening up their belts to some pretty kind of crazy things. I've seen in a state of Maine, not that this is New Hampshire, but I suspect that it will probably see it happen, that carriers are saying they won't write homes with roofs over 15 years. It's a really crazy world out there, and I spend every single day on the phone with customers going over renewals and explaining all of these things that they don't comprehend. Why can an insurance carrier make me redo my roof? I have 30-year shingles. I hear that frequently and so forth like that. So my question is there going to be, or are we working towards something to put people in these situations that just don't have the ability to go put a roof on their house? Like, there are certainly carriers that are coming back. Even Lloyd's of London is turning down.
So you're really touching upon a very, very broad issue, and there's no direct way to answer it without elaborating. I'll say, yes, we're aware of hardening markets everywhere, and it's really driven by the reinsurance markets. And as we sit here and think about what we've been dealing with in our own state, whether it be flood, recent floods, there have been fires out west, there have been hurricanes. Every insurance company that writes business, they insure their own risk. So they're taking, whenever there was losses, they're sharing that losses with their other companies that reinsure them. So as the reinsurers have taken on big losses, they're being very selective in the types of risk that they're accepting from those mainstream companies that we think of. You mentioned MetLife before, you mentioned Farmers, I think it was. So when you think of some of these mainstream property and casualty companies, I'll mention Farmers that you mentioned, State Farm, the Geicos of the world. As these types of companies are renewing their business, it is becoming more difficult for them to reinsure the business. So it's creating this hardening market. We haven't found ourselves yet in a situation to advocate for what's called a FAIR plan, which allows that guaranteed placement, because hey, we live in New Hampshire. It's live free or die. You don't have to buy some of these types of insurance, and we know that the products are still available. What we're seeing is just that premiums are going up. Christian can talk more about what types of rates that we're seeing. My personal homeowners policy, I think, jumped 10%. My automobile policy jumped 7.5% this past year. So it's
that's actually really low.
It is pretty good, but it all ties back to that reinsurance pool. What we have done proactively, if we're surveying the companies that do write business in New Hampshire to make sure the products are still available, and certainly we try to understand the impact on premiums. One last thing I'll touch upon before letting Christian talk about the rates that we're seeing is in the consumer services division, we're frequently contacted by people, especially in New Hampshire, who are having a renewal come up, and it might be, hey, listen, your shingles are starting to curl. We're not going to stay on your business because you need to replace the roof. Yet it's the third week of January going into February, and if you're lucky, there's only 6 inches of snow on the roof, not 3 feet. If anybody finds themselves in that situation, what we do is we intercede on behalf of the consumer, talk to the company, and find a way for them to stay on that business until the springtime when you have a chance to address some of those deficiencies. So as an agent, if that's what you're into and you're getting pushed back on some companies on renewal business, please let us know. We can usually help out.
Good to know. And that reinsurance, obviously, I'm aware very much of reinsurance and what they've been doing to the market. My understanding is that they're not mandated by the state departments of insurance. And so is that accurate? And that because they're not mandated, they're able to increase their rates along with being selective, right? And that's obviously impacting us all as well.
Correct.
Yeah, the reinsurance market is largely unregulated. It's certainly not in our statutes or under our purview. And that is a challenge. It really is.
The last thing I was going to mention, and I'm pretty sure you're going to use the same line, New Hampshire Live Free or Die, is the non-mandating of auto insurance.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So coincidentally, I think New Hampshire is no, not at all. As a matter of fact, New Hampshire, I believe, is the last state that does not mandate automobile insurance, and I believe we have, if not the highest, the second highest rate of auto policy ownership in the country. So it's not needed.
We have very responsible consumers in the state. We're something like 92, 93% of car owners have insurance. And when we look at it, there's every indication that even if we did put in a law, it wouldn't bump that number up too much. Like for example, the state of Maine has a very, very strong, there are significant penalties. I believe they can tow your car in the state of Maine if you can't produce insurance in Maine at any given time, right?
You can lose your driver's license.
You can lose your driver's license. And I think they're only at about 96% of coverage. So even if we were to kind of make that gap up, we wouldn't ever get to that 100% of coverage. And then being the independent libertarian streak that we have in the state, I don't know if it's worth that fight.
I didn't realize it was at 92%.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some states. There are many states in the nation where the number is down in the 70s or less, in 70% of coverage, and that's even in many states, like every other state where it is required. Yeah. So, and the way they measure that is by the number and the severity and the frequency of uninsured motorist coverage, right? So, how many claims and how much losses you're seeing in that bucket, right? So that.
Very good question. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your response.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know it's just the two of you. Jennifer, Ben, anything else you want to add? Or
I learned a lot. I was particularly interested in the ICHRA, I think is how you said it, because we are a small business, a nonprofit small business here in Portsmouth. We have 6 full-time employees, and as we are focused on retaining those employees, because we know it's going to be hard to replace them if they leave. Expanding our benefits for them is a priority, and it's hard for a small business to be able to do that and compete with larger businesses that are, much more equipped to do that sort of thing. I'm sure Emma can relate to that too on the call at the Portsmouth Historical Society, similar position, I'm sure. So that was great, and I really appreciate the input on that. I'll definitely be looking into that product line.
Great. One last thing I'm going to mention here. For those who are here today, those who registered for the webinar, we're going to send out by email a copy of our ICHRA FAQ. A lot of great information there about that particular arrangement. The P&C checklist, we went down kind of the list of what types of coverages that business should be considering purchasing. That will be sent out. Contact the healthcare.gov, the III Insuring Your Business, which is that booklet, and lastly, the Consumer Services number. We'll get all of that information out to the webinar participants later on today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of the group, really appreciate your time today and all the information. We'll be sure to share this video out through our newsletters and social media. So hopefully we'll get some few more eyeballs on it. Yeah, it was very educational and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So I'll just, one more pitch. Make sure you're reaching out to agent, check your coverages, make sure you're well positioned for anything that's going to come up, and call us if you need anything. So 800-852-3416 is our direct line. I hope everybody has a great day.